a character from the books. In fact, he sounds like a character mentioned in the books, but we can't be sure what that means because George R.R. Martin, the author, said this: "As for the Night's King, the form I prefer, in the books he is a legendary figure, akin to Lan the Clever and Brandon the Builder, and no more likely to have survived to the present day than they have." So the problem here is that we don't have a character who has been fleshed out in the books to base our thoughts on. It's very likely that he has parts of this Night's King story incorporated into his, but we really just don't know. The show is far beyond the books in presenting the White Walkers to us, and they haven't even shown us that much. We have religious zealots like Melisandre and followers of the Lord of Light that think he is the Great Other, or the dark force opposite of the Lord of Light. But we know this isn't exactly right either. Depending on how you see the gods and how, people following religions relates to magic, which is a real force in this world, I think we can all agree that it isn't as cut and dry as the zealots think it is. So that sets up a situation where some people think they know the answers, but they're probably actually wrong. We'll talk about this more in relation to some of the other problems, so I'll leave it there for right now. The next problem is that we know he was a man that was turned into the Night King, but we don't know who he was, and that means we don't know what he wants. We do have a pretty good explanation of why he was created in the first place, which was to destroy the first men who were encroaching on the children of the forest land and destroying weirwood trees, which are basically their gods. Leaf told Bran this, and they went as far as giving us history and lore segments to back that up. History and lore, of course, are the DVD extras that they put on, with the seasons when they release them. So there was pretty good information there about the conflict between the children of the forest and the first men, how they had to join together and form the pact, and all those other things that we already know from reading the books. That means that it is important to keep in mind that this is part of his motivation, to kill humans. He was designed for it, and we've seen him do that. At the same time, there's something else obviously going on, and who he was may be important, or maybe it's not. Bran's the only character left who might be able to figure out who he was. I mean, the children of the forest would know that, but it isn't clear if there are any more of them left alive in our story. Of course, this is a problem in and of itself, but I don't think there is any way we can say if we will see more children in the show outside of them actually showing up in it. Bran is the key to figuring out how to defeat the Night King. I feel sure about that, but whether that includes us finding out who he was before he was turned could go either way. It may be that we won't learn more about that until the prequel series comes out. And I've mentioned this in other videos. That used to be one of my biggest fears, is that we would never find out who the Night King was or what the truth behind his motivation was. Now I don't feel as worried about that, since we're probably going to learn a lot about that in the upcoming series. As for what he wants besides destroying humanity, we have the interview with the actor who says directly that he didn't want to be the Night King and that he wants revenge. That could just mean that he wants to wipe out the children of the forest. The show killed off a bunch of the children in the Hold the Door episode without giving much attention to them, and then didn't really mention them after that. Before that happened, I had always assumed they would play a big role in the endgame. In the books, the Isle of Faces seems really important, and for a long time, I've imagined that the major battle with the Night King would happen there. As we gear up for Season 8, this seems pretty unlikely. I mean, it could happen if Mira brings her father Howland Reed back to Winterfell, or if Bran sees something in the Weirwood Network. But nothing I've seen leading up to the season has given me hope on these points playing out in the TV show. It would take a lot of explaining at this point to build that up, and there isn't a lot of time left in the series. The safer bet is the Battle of Winterfell happens, and it either ends with the Night King's defeat, or the White Walkers overrun Winterfell without killing off the main players on the side of the living. Knowing that means it's less likely that we'll learn anything about the Night King that doesn't come from Bran. I tend to think this means that we'll just get bits and pieces related to how to defeat him, because that's where we are. We're in a battle. That's definitely going to happen. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Night's King, the legendary figure from the book, because he likely was a Stark, or at least he's from the same bloodline. One of the cool things about this series is that history is unreliable, so we don't really know much of anything. We just have stories that have been passed down for generations. In that scenario, it's possible that he wants revenge against House Stark. Sum it up really quickly, he was handed over, there was some negotiations, and so there is a possibility that he's been sitting up north with a chip on his shoulder just wanting to destroy House Stark. That is definitely possible. Either way, I don't think that is the overriding purpose of what he's going to mean to the endgame. So it's definitely a problem as to who he is and what he wants. And that leads into the next one, which is that he doesn't communicate. Not in the common tongue anyways. Like not in a way that he's just going to come out and discuss terms with the side of the living. Of course, Bran can possibly communicate with him inside the Weirwood network. I think the Night King has access to the I think the show's pretty much shown that whenever he touched Bran inside there. But beyond that, I think he probably does similar things inside the Weirwood network that the Children of the Forest do. And I think it's given us some evidence for that in that he waited for Dany to come with her dragons, and he strategized the whole setup for getting the dragon. So it was clear that he had throwing weapons. He could have wiped them out on their little island, but he used them as bait to get a dragon instead. That leads me to believe that he has some ability to see what's going on outside of his own area there, and he knew that she was going to show up. But yes, communication is a problem. It makes it seem a lot less likely that there will be some sort of agreement or pact, which is a bit of a problem based on it pigeonholes him in relation to the last couple of problems that stand out to me right on the surface. The next problem is that it's been set up that if you kill him, that will kill all the other wights that have been turned, the White Walkers that he created, and therefore ending the entire war. That seems a little bit too easy. Not easy in the sense that there won't be a great battle leading up to that, but it just seems like it's a bit of a simple solution. Now, it's only been hinted at that that's what will happen based on things that we've seen. I imagine that there is something more, like it's just not getting him one-on-one with Jon having Valyrian steel, striking a death blow, and then everything goes back to normal. And that leads right into the final major problem that I see with the Night King in relation to Season 8, and that is that he can't win. No matter what you think is going to happen, unless you're just bucking the idea of the story as it's been told so far, you really can't believe that this whole series is going to end with the Night King on top. Like, the Song of Ice and Fire is not a story about how fire was not good enough or strong enough to overcome ice, and the whole thing ends in a winter that never ends, right? I mean, come on. So we know he's going to lose, and that's a problem. If you're anything like me, you've spent so much time reading the dreams in the books over and over again, looking for clues, trying to figure out who this guy is. And now that we're at the end of the TV series version, he's been set up as the great evil, the big bad, and we just know in our hearts that he's not going to come out on top. This is more of a storytelling problem, I guess, but it creates a situation where there has to be some sort of payoff. Like, we have to almost feel bad for the Night King when he dies. And because, like I said, taking him out destroys the other side, that leaves a lot more story to be told in order for it to be a satisfying conclusion. Of course, there are a lot of different theories out there. At this point, I don't think it's worth delving into them too deeply. Of course, some people think he wants to take a queen. Other people think that Jon is necessary, that Jon will have to sacrifice and take his place, essentially becoming the new Night King. I don't think any of those things are going to happen. I'm not saying that they couldn't happen. I guess we need to also address the idea that maybe Bran is the Night King. But I think it's going to come down to something a little more straightforward in that we know he has to lose. So that means that in order for there to be balance in the ending of the story, that the other side can't exactly just win either. And as we get into the rest of this series, I'll talk about that because it relates to everyone else's story and the problems I see there. But I wanted to start off with this one. The Night King is something that I've thought about, I've read about, I've made videos about in the past. And now that we're getting to the end, it's just sort of like, wow, there it is. He's going to go down. And